Hi guys, I'm Chronically Jenny and welcome back to my Dysautonomia Awareness Month video series for 2020. Today we are talking about a particularly difficult topic, I think, when it comes to POTS and dysautonomia. We want to share with you one thing that we would like to see change with how people with POTS are treated by medical professionals. POTS is a very tricky thing to be diagnosed because it's so invisible, and a lot of people are misdiagnosed with mental health problems such as anxiety because the symptoms can be similar. Have a listen to what my dysautonomia warriors from around the world have to say about their healthcare, and hopefully in the future we can make a change.
So one thing that I would like to touch on with diagnosis, I had a very rocky road with my diagnosis. I went through doctors that said that it was all in my head, that it's just fainting, and all the other symptoms I had was just something that teenage girls do, and that it was all related to stress and anxiety, and they just kind of fobbed it off and didn't really pay much attention to it. And that's really not helpful at all to not be believed or not to be taken seriously. Some forms of dysautonomia, especially POTS, isn't particularly rare, and it's so strange to think that because it's not rare, lots of people are dealing with it. Most health professionals don't actually know about it. They don't know what it's about. They don't really know how to treat it. So in order to get better treatment, we need better diagnosis. We need quicker diagnoses, because then we can get our treatment, and hopefully the earlier that we get it and the earlier that we're diagnosed, the better life that we can lead. If I was diagnosed a lot earlier, I would be really on top of my management and treatment a lot earlier than I am now, and I dread to think like how much different life would be now if I could deal with it as soon as I started having the symptoms. Treatment wise, I would also like the mobility issues to do with dysautonomia to be addressed a lot more. I myself, I can't stand up for very long, maybe a couple of minutes without feeling really unwell or passing out. And I rely on a lot of mobility aids. And one thing that kind of shocked me during my treatment was that mobility aids weren't even mentioned. The idea of a wheelchair wasn't even mentioned at all. I had to go through the community, the chronic illness community online, to kind of get a feel for what could help me for that. And a lot of people suggested wheelchairs and walking sticks, but no doctor suggested it to me. I had to go out myself and find it, and it could have relieved and eased so many symptoms that I was experiencing a lot sooner. And I think it really needs to be addressed a lot more, that the mobility issues that people face with dysautonomia are real and serious. And I just don't think that's being addressed very much right now. And I really think it needs to.
I think in simple terms, I just wish that the diagnosis process was easier, and I wish people were treated better by doctors. I mean, that's quite general, and there are some incredible doctors out there. I'm lucky enough to be under one of them. But generally, it is really blooming hard to get diagnosed with POTS. I spent so many years being told that I was just anxious because my pulse was a bit fast, or that it was all psychological and I just didn't want to go to school, or I was like worried about stuff, and that's why I was getting all these symptoms. And going through that kind of disbelief from medical professionals for so long, and knowing that there's something not right, has a massive effect on your mental health. So I just wish that doctors didn't automatically put it down to anxiety. I wish that perhaps there was more understanding and education for GPs and consultants, so that they knew what signs to look out for, and they knew kind of where to send somebody to get testing. Because as soon as I'd had the testing, I was diagnosed with the EDS first, and that kind of then opened the doors to getting the testing for POTS. And as soon as I had the test, while I was having the test, the cardiologist that was doing it said, yep, you've got POTS. And I was like, if it was that easy, why have I spent like 10 years being told that it was all in my head? So I wish the diagnostic process was quicker and easier so that people didn't have to suffer for so many years. And the way people are treated by doctors, I just wish that it was taken more seriously. I'm really, really lucky with my POTS specialist, but he's up in London, and because he is one of the best POTS specialists in the country, you can kind of see him once a year and that's kind of it, which, you know, I'm grateful to be able to have that. But I kind of feel like my local cardiology team don't take it particularly seriously. Like, I've been having quite a bad flare up recently, and my consultant up in London suggested that I be referred to my cardiology team at my local hospital, but they refused to see me because there was nothing wrong with my blood tests to suggest that I had like heart failure or anything like that. And I'm kind of thinking, well, no, you know, yes, that needed testing because we were concerned that something like that was going on, but no, I don't have heart failure, but I do have POTS, and it is just debilitating. But you're just expected to get on with it and to suffer with the symptoms and to not have any help, and that just frustrates me. I don't know if it's because of a lack of funding, a lack of awareness, a lack of, you know, the right people in local like care to see you, but it just would be good to have a bit more support, because, you know, these symptoms, they're all encompassing. They affect every single part of my life. They affect being able to do anything. You know, I'm stuck on the sofa today because I'm not well enough to do much, and you just think, why is there no help, like local help for people who are going through stuff like this? So I do just wish that, yeah, there was more local help, that there was, like, when doctors are treating you, that they don't kind of see it as kind of like a, oh, you've got POTS, like, so what, it's no big deal, because it is. I wish they just understood, yeah, just how much of a big deal it is and how debilitating it is. But I guess with us talking about it and raising awareness, hopefully that will go some way to helping.
Education within the medical community with doctors, including the specialists that we see. I would say the change that I would most want would be even the specialists that we see to be up and up on all the latest research, so that we don't necessarily feel like we're lab rats, and that, you know, we're just throwing darts at a board hoping that something works and hoping that something sticks. I've been given certain medications that we thought, hey, let's try it, you know, a trial and error. And I know every patient is different, but I was on medications that made me worse over time, during the periods I was taking them, and then over time after the period I took them, you know. So if I can go back and redo certain things, I definitely would, but it oftentimes feels like we're just like throwing darts at a board and we're just hoping for the best. So if I could change that feel for patients, then I would definitely change that. Have more confidence, and you know, have the doctors have more confidence in their regimen and their treatment plans, and have it all backed by certain either studies or statistics that they can show the patients, and again, not necessarily make them feel like they're a lab rat.
I think for me, doctors really need to understand the impact they can have on their patients by little throwaway comments to them that patients will remember years down the line. You know, when I was first diagnosed, it was all about anxiety. That's what I had. I didn't have anything physical or any dysfunction in my body. It was a mental health problem, and I've lived with anxiety for a long time, and I knew the difference between this. This wasn't panic attacks. I think what was worse is that they didn't even treat the anxiety that I supposedly had. You know, it was just anxiety. It's never just anxiety. The just belittles that fact, belittles a patient's mental health, whether it's a problem or not. You know, it doesn't matter whether it was something more physical. And I remember going in to see a doctor, supposedly a very specialised POTS doctor, and entering the office out of breath with my walker, and him looking me up and down and tutting and saying, "We don't like people using those for POTS." And I found myself explaining that I had EDS and it was to help my joints, and feeling bad about it when I shouldn't have, because I know how much that mobility aid helps me. It means that I always have a seat. This appointment was in London. I was going by myself. It would not have been safe for me to go without that mobility aid. This must have been 3 years ago, and I remember it like it was yesterday. Doctors need to realise that patients are people, and they need to be a little bit kinder sometimes.
One thing I would like to change about how we're diagnosed. It would be nice if we would only have one doctor we go to who knows everything about all the symptoms that we have, but that sadly isn't the case. Sometimes you have to go to a different doctor for different symptoms, and it can get crazy.
One thing that I would love for doctors or any practitioner in the medical community to understand about dysautonomia or POTS is that every single person will react and tolerate the illness differently. It has been well known in the medical community that every single individual will respond to mainstream diagnoses differently, whether that's congestive heart failure, cancer, anything that is well known. It is generally understood that patients respond differently to treatment and their new diagnosis, and that's well received in the medical community. But with the chronic illness community, there seems to be a lack of understanding that spectrum of tolerance. And it would be great if doctors and medical professionals could understand that piece of chronic illness, that some of us might be fine and functional and tolerate medications and lead a very healthy life. Some of us might not respond to the first treatment, might still have some other debilitating symptoms that still need some investigation. And wherever the patient is on the spectrum is okay. And that doesn't mean that the doctor is a failure. And a side note to that is I know firsthand, because I'm an ER nurse, is that doctors and nurses are people too, and we're not perfect. We make mistakes. We don't communicate effectively. Some of us, might not communicate effectively all the time. And finding a doctor or a nurse or another sort of practitioner does take some work to find one that works with us. And I think we all just need to be a little bit more compassionate with each other and understand that we're all struggling. But definitely doctors and other medical professionals could use a little more compassion when it comes to chronic illness.
I hope that has given you an insight into what it's like to have to deal with healthcare professionals when you have an illness such as POTS. I'm not saying that all medical professionals are like this, but we need the ones that are to realise that they make life much more difficult for patients than it needs to be by making them feel bad about their conditions. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, share and subscribe, and I will see you next week for the last in this series.